The hunt for the suspects who opened fire on Mourners. A 7-year-old girl remains seriously ill in hospital. Another girl and 4 women were injured. They were at a service for a mother and her daughter.
Chilled to the bone to think that there would be a gun fired in broad daylight on our streets.
Also ahead, dozens dead after a passenger jet crashes in Nepal, the country's worst air disaster in 3 decades. Labour's plan to heal the NHS, but is it the right prescription? And in sport, Arsenal march on at the top of the Premier League as tempers boil over in the North London derby.
This is getting out.
This is ITV News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good evening. Police today gave a chilling account of how gunmen indiscriminately sprayed shotgun pellets into a crowd of mourners who were leaving a memorial mass, injuring a 7-year-old girl who is seriously ill in hospital. The suspected drive-by close to one of Britain's biggest rail stations, London's Euston, yesterday afternoon, has terrified people living nearby, and more than 24 hours on, there have been no arrests. At the moment, panicked mourners sought sanctuary inside the church they'd only just left, was caught on camera and features at the beginning of Cedric Carrier's report.
These were the scenes inside the church, just moments after the drive-by shooting outside. There was panic as people ran in for safety and screaming in sheer terror. Many had gathered outside after attending a memorial service when a shotgun was fired from a moving car. Next door, the manager of the local food bank heard the shots ring out.
What alerted me was the noise, the sound of the shot. And already our manager was up at the gate because our session was just drawing to a close. And she immediately locked the gate. Again, she couldn't see anything, but she saw people running. We're just chilled to the bone to think that there would be a gun fired in broad daylight on our streets.
The pellets fired into a crowd of mourners on a Saturday afternoon. 6 people were injured, 4 women and 2 young children, aged just 12 and 7. Police say they still don't know why.
The 48-year-old woman has sustained potentially life-changing injuries. A 12-year-old girl sustained a leg injury. She is expected to make a full recovery. A 7-year-old girl was more seriously injured. She remains in hospital in a stable but life-threatening conditions.
They were shot after mourning the deaths of Frisha Calderon on the left and her daughter Sarah. Both had died within a month of each other. An invitation to celebrate life ended with a 7-year-old girl fighting for hers. Police believe the shots fired at her were from a car similar to this one. They're now on the hunt for a black Toyota CHR with a 2019 registration.
What many in this community cannot understand is how people who'd come to be with their loved ones to mourn ended up being victims of such shocking violence. Even more disturbing is the fact that there were 2 young children among them.
Police say they're determined to bring to justice those responsible for this attack. Cedric Carrier, ITV News.
Nepal is mourning its worst air disaster in 3 decades after a passenger jet crashed into a hillside as it was coming into land. The Yeti Airlines flight from Kathmandu to the tourist town of Pokhara was carrying 72 passengers and crew. 68 people have been confirmed dead. The rescue operation will resume tomorrow. Vincent McAvaney's report begins with images of the flight just before it came down.
The final moments of Yeti Airways Flight 691. A struggle clearly visible. The aircraft shakes and pitches erratically, turning sharply before crashing into a gorge, killing at least 68. The man who filmed the plane's last moments ran to the scene.
एक बहुत सी ब्लास्ट आ गया, मैं तो वीडियो ऑफ कर लिया था और एक फ्लेम आ गया था, वो लाल फ्लेम आ गया था, और जहाँ मैं बैठ रहा हूँ वहाँ पर मुझे भूकंप जैसे भी वो कंपन आ गया था.
A search and rescue operation involving hundreds of Nepalese soldiers recovered the bodies of all but 4 of the 72 passengers and crew on board. It's unclear what caused the crash moments from landing. The plane had taken off from Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, on a 27-minute flight to the newly opened airport in Pokhara. Rescue efforts have now been suspended overnight, but the government has pledged to continue come sunrise. The Nepalese Prime Minister promised the full force of his country's army and police in response to the tragic incident. The Himalayan country has an unfortunate record of air accidents. The weather can change suddenly. Airstrips are typically situated in difficult-to-reach mountainous areas, and there's poor regulation of aircraft maintenance standards. As the investigation into what caused the incident continues, the airline Yeti cancelled all its regular flights for Monday in mourning for the passengers who lost their lives. Vincent McAviney, ITV News.
Well, here, the Labour leader today suggested the NHS cannot go on as it has done and will need big changes if it's to even exist. Sir Keir Starmer's unusually stark language and his prescription for reforms he believes will ensure its survival. Our political correspondent David Wood has more.
Long delays for ambulances, significant waits in accident and emergency, and a backlog of non-urgent operations. This is the reality for many patients in the NHS in England this winter. The Labour leader says long-term reform is the way to fix things. Whilst his criticism of mind-boggling bureaucracy in the service has angered some, he insists reform is necessary.
You will always have, whether it's the NHS or any other public service, people say, well, don't do it, it's always been done this way. They're nearly always wrong. Of course, there will be, challenges whenever you reform something, but frankly, if you don't reform the NHS, then I fear it will die.
Under the plans, Labour wants to recruit and train more NHS staff like midwives, doctors and nurses. It also wants to allow patients a chance to self-refer to specialists, like someone with back pain referring themselves to a physiotherapist. Also look at using the private sector effectively whilst keeping the NHS free, and to make all GPs NHS employees rather than them running their own surgeries. But one union says Labour has no idea how the NHS works.
We are not averse to change. It's a complete fallacy that doctors want a health service to stay as it is. We're the first people to say we want change in the health service, but please can we have it evidence-based? Please can you listen to frontline staff?
Others like Labour's long-term plans, but warn one major short-term problem needs treatment first.
It would be to address our crisis in social care. Because as long as we have 160,000 plus vacancies in social care, then not only are we not providing people the care they want, but it's very hard to get people out of hospital. And that's the thing that leads to hospitals being full, ambulances waiting, etc., etc.
Rishi Sunak says cutting NHS waiting lists is a key priority. A general election may be some time off, but the political party's prescription for the NHS is already a major battleground.
Well, David, one big issue for the NHS, for patients, for public services are, of course, the strikes that are happening right now.
Yes, and we have a big week with more strikes planned and potentially announcements of other strikes. Let's focus on the public sector. There's a backdrop of teaching strikes in various different parts of Scotland. And then tomorrow in England, we'll hear from a major teaching union about whether its members have voted for strike action. We also could hear from the GMB union about whether there could be 6 further ambulance strikes in England. Then on Wednesday, the Royal College of Nursing strike in England. That rolls into Thursday when paramedics in Wales are also walking out. The talks will continue in these various different disputes, but all sides involved still seem pretty far apart at the moment.
And David, tomorrow the government's so-called anti-strike laws will be voted on as well.
Yes, these are controversial. The initial focus will be on having a minimum service level in rail, ambulance and fire. The government source is still insisting to me tonight these are reasonable, and in fact the government could have gone far further. Unions disagree with that and say these are anti-strikes. Labour will vote against them, and I think going into another crucial week of negotiations, threats of more strikes on the way, this will only sour relations between ministers and unions.
All right, David, thank you. ITV News can reveal the government is expected to announce a new law banning so-called gay conversion therapy tomorrow. The ban will outlaw attempts to change a person's sexuality and also attempts to change someone's gender identity. The government had previously said that trans conversion therapy would be excluded from a ban. It's understood that Downing Street has been surprised by the level of cross-party support, including from within the Conservative Party, for a total ban. And a man in his 60s has been arrested in Cheshire under terrorism laws after traces of uranium were found at Heathrow Airport at the end of December, when a small amount of the radioactive material was discovered. He's been released on bail. Finally, Arsenal's dream of winning a first Premier League title for 19 years took another step forward today after beating rivals Tottenham in the North London derby. Victory takes them 8 points clear at the top. But the match was marred by a flashpoint after the final whistle when the Arsenal goalkeeper, Aaron Ramsdale, was kicked on the edge of the pitch by a fan. Spurs said tonight they are trying to identify the supporter and would take the strongest possible action. Here's Chris Scudder.
Victory always tasted sweetest in the backyard of bitter rivals, but with more than half of this odd season split by the World Cup still to come, Arsenal know it's far from done yet. There was a World Cup flavour to Arsenal's first. England's Saka tormented Tottenham, and France goalkeeper Hugo Lloris made a hash of trying to keep it out.
Lloris, that's just so poor.
1-0 to the Arsenal. The Gunners were firing rockets.
It's absolutely shaken the frame of the goal.
But if at first you don't succeed,
And he finds the bottom corner, and Arsenal do get what is a deserved 2-0 advantage here.
Captain Martin Odegaard leading by example. And even when Tottenham turned up the heat, Arsenal had all the answers too at the back, with Aaron Ramsdale outstanding in goal. It all got a little unsavoury at the final whistle as the tensions of a high-stakes derby boiled over. Ramsdale appeared to be kicked in the back by a fan while collecting his water bottle. But it was quickly quelled and one more hurdle overcome in search of that elusive first title since 2004. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
And that is all from us for this evening. The weather is up next, but from me and everyone on the weekend team, good night.
You may want to soak up this lovely winter sun whilst it lasts. Heinz Big Soup sponsors ITV National Weather.
Hello there, good evening. It has been so much colder outside today. It's going to be staying cold tonight as well. Further, wintry showers affecting northern parts of Scotland. Showers also into parts of southern Scotland, northern England, parts of Wales, the Midlands. Here, a mix of rain, sleet and hill snow. Quite a widespread frost tonight across the north in particular. And where we've got those wet surfaces, the threat of ice come dawn as well. Now, across the south, we've got a deepening area of low pressure in the Channel. That's bringing heavy rainfall through the Channel Islands, southern counties of England, the risk of localised flooding for a time as well. And then later on in the southeast, as that rain hits the cold air, you can see those temperatures dropping away. We could see some snowfall for a time. It's marginal, all dependent on how low those temperatures drop. But the Met Office have got a weather warning in place because that snow could coincide with the rush hour tomorrow morning, so some travel disruption likely. The system clears off the scene pretty quickly, and thereafter not too bad. Cold, crisp winter sunshine. Good night.
Heinz Big Soup sponsors ITV National Weather.